The radio started answering in my own voice.
The snow had already buried the trail behind us.
We were listening to a transmission that should not have been possible.
The voice on the radio said, "Don't let them turn around." Nobody moved.
The trees were too quiet for that kind of weather.
Then, from somewhere uphill, someone called my name. It wasn't over the radio. It was coming from the dark. I've carried this story long enough.
If this channel means anything to you, stay with me.
I tell it because one winter night, something learned my voice.
Back then, Olympics still had places that could close around you like a fist.
I was stationed near Port Angeles, working winter patrol.
The sky drops low enough to press on your shoulders.
That day started with a missing person call. They were experienced enough to be dangerous.
Daniel came back alone. He walked into the station without gloves. His first words were, "She came back wrong." I remember that because of how quiet he sounded. He said his sister had started following a second set of tracks. Then Mara returned from the wrong direction. She was smiling and told him Lee had twisted his ankle.
I asked if she was injured.
I asked if she was confused. She knew everything, but she kept calling the visitor center the Warm Building. She pointed into the forest and said, "He is standing where the snow listens." I wrote that down as shock language. But then Daniel told me he ran because she left no tracks. That was when I called in Miller. He was search and rescue, but we treated him like one of our own. He was a quiet guy. Always smelled like coffee and wet wool.
He had this habit of checking the tree line before he'd say a word.
There was someone else in the station that day.
Her name was Ellen Rourke.
She wasn't a ranger. She ran the winter equipment maintenance.
She'd come up to check a generator before the storm locked us in.
When Daniel mentioned the snow listening, Ellen dropped her clipboard.
The sound was so loud it made everyone go quiet. She apologized and left, but I saw her face. It wasn't just fear. It was recognition.
We got what we could from Daniel and wrapped him in blankets.
Urgent. We sent him down with a plow driver as soon as the road opened. He didn't want to leave, but he couldn't stay either.
That's just how fear works when you're stuck.
At 3:40, Miller and I headed out with Chris Voss.
Voss was younger, sharp, and really ambitious.
He believed that procedure could keep us safe if he filled out enough forms.
I don't mean that cruelly, because guys like him are actually useful.
The storm got thicker while we were still near the setter.
Snow fell in heavy, wet clumps that stuck to everything. It was cold enough to sting any skin we had exposed.
Our world narrowed down to just our headlamps and the crunch of snowshoes.
We found Daniel's tracks right where he said they'd be.
One line of prints was staggering, with a snowshoe dragging.
Then there were just bare boot marks where he'd lost his gear. We marked the spot and kept pushing forward.
Miller saw the second set of tracks under some hemlocks.
He raised his hand and crouched down to look. There were 3 lines in the snow. Daniel's trail, the couple's prints, and then something else. Bare feet.
They weren't boot prints or animal tracks.
They were feet, long, narrow, and pressed deep into the crust.
You could even see the toes, and then they just vanished into the trees.
Voss tried to come up with a logical explanation. He kept talking about peeled soles and snow patterns. He wouldn't stop until Miller finally looked at him. Miller just said, "Stop making it smaller."
We followed the snowshoe tracks because that was the job.
The trees grew tight and the snow lay untouched.
The light drained from the day, turning the storm blue. About 15 minutes in, we heard Lee Mercer calling. He shouted over here from 80 yards ahead. We turned toward it, but there was no answer. Then Mara called from the right. It wasn't a scream, just a soft, questioning, "Daniel?"
Voss froze, watching his breath plume through his headlamp beam.
Miller whispered, "Do not split."
That should have been obvious.
The tracks divided at the base of a cedar tree.
Mara and Lee's snowshoe prints circled the tree once. The bare footprints circled it too. They crossed directly on top without collapsing the edges. Miller brushed snow from the cedar bark.
There were fresh scratches in it.
Voss suggested crampons, but Miller just asked, "On a cedar?"
The radio crackled at 4:29.
Dispatch checked our status.
I responded with our location and the fact that we had voice contact.
We moved another 100 yards.
That was when the first loop happened.
The tracks led us back to the same cedar.
Voss checked his compass. The needle was turning slowly, just drifting, lazy.
We marked a bearing by terrain and tried again.
At 200 steps, we reached the cedar again. Miller swore under his breath. There were more scratches on the bark and boot prints that didn't belong to us.
I looked down at the boot prints in the slope.
They were my own, right down to the cut on the sole.
The mountain was leaving my trail for us to follow.
The radio clicked again, breaking the silence.
There was no static, just the sound of my own breathing.
Then my voice spoke, warning us not to turn around. We decided to retreat, moving back up.
But our tracks simply ended in a clean line.
Beyond that, the snow was untouched and sloping upward.
Mara Mercer stepped out from behind a hemlock tree. Her face was calm. Too calm. She smiled at us, a polite, tired little smile.
Mara pointed downhill and told us Lee was standing where the snow listens.
Then she spoke in Voss's voice.
Voss made a sound of pure terror.
Mara's mouth opened, and the voice that came out was Ellen's?
She warned us not to follow what answers.
Miller ordered us to move up the slope immediately. Lee Mercer's headlamp appeared uphill, bobbing between the trees.
He shouted for help, and his voice sounded so real.
Miller grabbed my sleeve, pointing out the light was moving Rand. Voss broke and ran, ignoring Miller's shots.
He stopped suddenly, his body rigid.
He pointed past us, whispering that he could see the station. Something behind us knocked on wood, 3 slow knocks.
The sound was so ordinary it broke Voss. Miller tackled him, and we pinned him to the snow.
The snow under Miller's knee collapsed.
Something pulled him down.
His glove remained in my hand, empty and still warm.
The radio erupted with a chorus of voices.
It was like every person we'd lost was speaking at once. My own voice was layered over theirs, laughing and whispering.
Then, everything just stopped. In the silence, bare footprints started forming in the snow. They led us away from the cedar, straight uphill. I pulled Voss up, and he just followed. We tracked those bare feet for 20 minutes. They passed through trees that no person could ever fit through. Finally, we saw the lights of the visitor center. They were real fixed lights, not like the others. Ellen was standing there with a lantern, waiting. When she saw it was just us, her face fell.
She didn't cry, but she looked out into the storm. She held the lantern high, trying to show him the way.
Voss quit before spring and never went back to the woods.
The search for the others was just a formality. They found Lee's pack, but the radio inside was ancient. When the snow melted, we went back to the seer. The scratches were everywhere, even way up high. I found my own boot prints circling the tree. I filed the report, but I left out the real truth. Ellen asked me why I didn't mention how it lets one go. She said it has to learn new voices somehow.
I retired, but the radio kept acting up for years.
One night, I heard Tom's voice on the radio. He said he was almost back, so I just turned it off. I have a photo in my desk that I can't get rid of. It shows a red jacket hanging in the trees and 3 rangers standing with their backs to the woods. I stare at the photograph in my desk drawer. The edges are worn from years of handling. It captures that final winter at Hurricane Ridge.
The red jacket looks like a ghost in the frame. I remember how the storm swallowed everything else. It's a reminder of what the mountain kept. Then there are the footprints, bare and deep in the snow. They don't belong to any of us. They lead away from the trees, a trail of something else.
The 3 rangers are standing with their backs to the woods. We were trying to find our way back to something real. We didn't know we were being watched.
I close the drawer and lean back in my chair. The house is quiet, but I still hear the wind. It sounds like a voice, but I don't answer it. The wilderness doesn't care about our reports.
It just waits for the next winter. It waits for someone else to lose their way.
I think about Miller sometimes.
I wonder if he's still out there in the dark. Or if he's just another voice in the static. The radio on my desk is silent.
I keep it unplugged.
I've heard enough to last a lifetime. If you're ever up near Hurricane Ridge, stay on the trail. Don't go into the trees. And don't listen to the voices.
The mountain is still there, and it's still listening.
I'm done talking about it. I'm just going to sit here in the quiet. I look at the old radio one last time. It feels heavier than it should. I tape the box shut, sealing the silence inside. The house feels different now. The shadows don't seem to stretch as far. I walk to the kitchen to make coffee. The wind picks up, rattling the window pane. For a second, I think I hear a name. It's just the mountain playing trikes. I sit at the table and watch the steam rise. The silence is heavy, but it's natural. I take a slow sip, letting the warmth ground me. I think about the others who didn't make it back. It's not my burden to carry anymore. The rest is just history written in snow. I look out the window again. I see the reflection of the room behind me.
The mountain is miles away.
I finish my coffee and stand up. It's time to sleep.
The past is a locked room.
I walk down the hall. The floorboards creak in a familiar way.
I pass the desk and don't glance at it.
I reach my bedroom and close the door. The room is dark, but it's a good kind of dark. I lie down and close my eyes. For the first time in years, I don't think about the mountain. I don't think about the radio or the voices. I just drift into sleep, finally free. I wake up in the middle of the night to a sound. It is the distinct, rhythmic crackle of a radio transmission.
I lie still, my heart hammering, hoping it is just the house.
The sound persists, steady and insistent. I walk toward the hallway, my bare feet cold against the floorboards. The air feels heavy, charged with a static.
I reach the desk where I packed the radio away.
The box is still taped shut, but the sound is coming from inside.
It is not just static anymore. It is a voice, low and distorted.
I rip the tape off the box with trembling hands.
Inside, the radio is cold to the touch, covered in a fine layer of frost. The voice stops the moment I touch the plastic. I stare at the radio, waiting for it to start again.
My breath hitches as I realize the display is lit up.
It's the same frequency we used that night on the mountain. I should throw it out the window, but I can't move.
The radio seems to be pulling me in, a magnet for the memories.
I feel the cold from the device creeping up my arm.
Then the static returns, but it is different this time.
It is layered with the sound of wind and the crunch of snow.
It is the sound of that night, playing back in my own living room.
I hear Miller's voice, clear and sharp, calling out from the static.
He is asking me if I remember the way back.
I want to scream at him to stop, but my voice is gone.
The room begins to change.
The walls seem to stretch and fade, replaced by the dark trees.
I am back on the mountain, standing in the cold.
I look down at the radio in my hands.
It is no longer a piece of equipment. It is a mirror.
I realize then that I never really left the mountain.
The trees are shifting when I'm not looking.
I'm gripping this radio so hard my knuckles are turning white.
The static is starting to sound like a heartbeat.
There's a flicker of red in the distance.
It's that same red jacket Mara was wearing.
I want to turn away, but my feet are stuck.
The radio crackles, and it's Miller's voice.
He sounds so tired, like he's been walking for days. He says he's almost back, but the voice is right behind me.
I spin around, but there's nothing there.
The silence is heavier than the storm. I'm not alone, even if I can't see what's watching.
I start to walk, following the only path that doesn't feel like a trap. Every step is a struggle, but I gotta keep moving. I have to get back to the station before the mountain's done with me.
I see the faint yellow glow of the visitor center lights.
It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
I run, desperate to reach the safety of the building.
I reach the door and then collapse against it. I can hear the hum of the heater inside. I reach for the handle, but my hand stops. What if the station isn't real? What if this is just another trick?
I look back, and I think I see a figure in the shadows.
I push the door open and stumble inside. The warmth hits me like a physical blow. It's empty, but the air feels wrong. I lock the door and slide down to the floor. I'm safe. For now. But the mountain is still out there. I wonder if the wind will ever stop calling my name. Just sitting here on the floor, listening to the wind scream outside. The silence in here is heavy, like it's waiting for something to happen. I've got my hand on the radio, just waiting for that static to start up again. Then the radio just snaps to life, but there's no one talking.
It's just the sound of someone walking through deep, crusty snow.
The rhythm is perfectly synced to my own heartbeat, and I can't look away.
I stand up, my legs are shaking, and I head for the window.
The storm's cleared up just enough to see the moonlight on the snow.
There's a figure standing at the edge of the trees, just staring right at me. The figure raises a hand, and I realize it's wearing my own jacket.
It doesn't move like a person. It's all jerky, like a puppet on strings.
I back away from the window, but it just stays there.
The radio starts up again, but it's not a voice this time.
It's the sound of a door knocking. 3 slow, deliberate raps.
I look at the front door, then back at the window, and the figure's gone. I grab the flashlight and head for the door. My heart's just hammering. I don't want to open it, but I gotta see what's out there. The knocking comes again, even louder, and it's shaking the whole frame.
I reach for the deadbolt, but my fingers are shaking too hard.
I take a deep breath, close my eyes, and throw the door open.
There's nothing there, just the swirling snow and the empty forest.
I step out into the cold, and the snow's just biting at my face.
I shine the light into the trees and see that red jacket again.
There's bare footprints leading away from it, deep into the woods.
I follow the tracks, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. They don't look like they were made by a person. They're too light.
I know I should turn back, but I just can't. The tracks lead me to a clearing where the trees form a perfect circle.
In the center, there's a single worn ranger hat sitting on the snow.
I hear my own voice whispering from the trees, saying I'm almost back.
I stop, and for the first time, I don't even look for the source.